Hello and welcome to the UKSIF Leadership Podcast and our very exciting 12 Days of UKSIF-mas series, where we'll spend 12 days breaking down what we've been working on, big moves and big news in the sustainable finance sector. I'm Sally, and today I'm joined by my wonderful events team, Anna and Isabel, for the 5th day of UKSIF-mas, where we will be covering our 5 flagship conferences. Anna, Isabel, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Sally.
Perhaps I can start by running through the 5 flagship conferences that UKSIF runs. We do run 30 events a year, including roundtables, breakfast briefings, socials and forums. But these 5 events are definitely where we see the majority of our members and engage with the widest audience. These conferences include our Ownership Day, focusing on asset owners, Spring Conference up in Scotland, which welcomes a huge number of members both from Scotland and London, Alternative Investment Week, strangely enough, focusing on alternative investment managers, Good Money Week, which is a really cool campaign that UKSIF has been running for a very long time around mobilising retail finance. We host a conference during Good Money Week for our retail-facing members, pension funds, banks, financial advisors and asset managers. And finally, our largest event of the year, our Leadership Summit, which brings together leaders from across our membership, along with politicians, parliamentarians, and regulators, to discuss industry developments and how to position the UK as a leader in sustainable finance. Anna, I know that you've been digging into the numbers, so perhaps I can come to you to talk about the audience. What have we seen this year?
Yeah, so we've had a really amazing turnout for all of our flagship conferences this year, with every single flagship conference outgrowing the audience that it had in 2023. We've welcomed 661 members and supporters that have joined us from 304 companies. We've had a diverse range of members join us, and we've also welcomed lots of journalists, politicians, and policymakers.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna. And Isabel, I know that you've been looking through sort of our Q&A data on Slido. Could you give us an overview of that? How many questions have been asked this year?
Well, in answer to that, Sally, we've had actually a similar number to the actual amount of attendees. We've had over 600 questions. So it's actually really great to see the commitment and curiosity from our members. And I think that comes hand in hand with the growing amounts of data and research that is actually now out there in our industry. And ultimately, I guess it's inevitable that with more knowledge and information comes more questions.
Brilliant. And I know that you've been wading through them, but what are the largest topics raised?
So in terms of our hot topics, I think we can reveal with no surprise that regulation is at the top of everyone's agenda, with SDR being mentioned 37 times in questions, and FSDR being mentioned in 9, and the FCA being mentioned in 27 times. The word regulation itself was actually mentioned 45 times. I think it's encouraging to see members eager to stay at the top of the updates in ESG regulation and taking this discussion and discourse back to their respective areas of expertise. Alternatively, biodiversity is another big focus, with it being inquired about 15 times in questions and nature 19 times. I think these kinds of topics, along with the blue economy, are the freshest to our agenda and collectively really resonant in our event day feedback as well. And I think this certainly reflects our members' eagerness to hear more on an emerging sector like this. And obviously, this year has been a really political year, overwhelmingly at Leadership Summit, which obviously took place the day after the US election. So, unsurprisingly, the discussions on Trump, the US, and the Inflation Reduction Act went through the roof. I think it was unavoidable for a lot of our speakers and our panelists, and just the general discussion around this area of politics to be really, really relevant. And yeah, I do think there was an element of solidarity between staff and everyone that attended to kind of not simply anticipate what happens next, but actually collectively pledge as staff and members to a continued commitment here in the UK for sustainable finance and green growth. So that's kind of on an optimistic note, I do think. And so, yeah, I guess for you guys, this is mine and Anna's first year at UKSIF, but Sally, you've been here a while. What do you think is the best thing that's happened this year in UKSIF events?
Brilliant. Thanks, Isabel. I mean, it's really interesting to hear about those topics, and it's definitely areas that we're continuing to focus on here at UKSIF as we sort of build the agendas for next year. Biodiversity and regulation sort of going nowhere, but I do think that this has sort of been a very uniquely political year. So again, no surprise that that sort of popped up. But in terms of sort of what the best thing about this year has been, from my perspective, we've had excellent speakers, several senior representatives from the FCA, including their COO, Emily Shepherd. We had the CEO of Royal London Group, Barry O'Dwyer. We've had the pensions regulator. We've had market leaders. We've had more people attending than ever before. I think the best thing from my perspective is probably that such a large number of people now are registering for our events before they've even seen the agendas. We launched Ownership Day last week, and we've already got an incredibly high number of registrations. It shows a real trust in us as an organization and as an events team to produce quality content that they can take away and use in their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, Sally, I completely agree. I think that's really echoed in our survey responses. So after each event, we ask our attendees to fill out a survey, and I've collected the responses. So the main metric we measure is how quickly people can use the information they've learned. And 99% of people said they can use the information that they learned from our sessions within 1 year, with just under 80% being able to use the information immediately. We also ask our attendees some other questions, such as, would you recommend the event to a colleague? And how do you rate the event? And 97% of attendees would recommend the event to a colleague, and 98% of attendees rated the event good or excellent. So we're really happy with this feedback.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and it's important to sort of focus on that main metric, as Anna talked about. This is something that we really focus on, is how quickly people can use what they learned. And so it's great to see sort of the survey responses from this year, sort of adding up to what we hoped they would. Hopefully one day we'll be 100% can use what they learned immediately, but got to aim high.
One of the main questions I had when I first started UKSIF was, how do you guys build the agendas?
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. I think that's interesting and definitely a question I think a lot of people and members ask. Firstly, I think if we start at the beginning, I'm always looking quite a few months ahead when I'm writing an agenda. As you guys definitely see in the office, I'm currently working on the agenda for Ownership Day and Spring Conference already. A big part of how we start writing them is by sitting in on member roundtables. We had a series of policy roundtables for pensions recently, and that helped me write the agenda for Ownership Day. And I've also just come back from Edinburgh, where I was with Anna, where I've been speaking to a lot of our Scottish members about the topics that are affecting them most, which of course I'm going to use to help to build the agenda ahead of Spring Conference. As Anna mentioned earlier, we do have our sort of post-event survey as well as our membership survey, both of which are forums for members to let us know what they would like to hear more about. That sort of definitely helps form our agendas, particularly if something is coming up a lot, like biodiversity, regulation, politics. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that we have a wonderful committee called the Industry Development Committee who work with us on topics, speaker suggestions. They make our lives so much easier and our content so much better. They also help with suggesting formats and events and other knowledge sharing opportunities. They've helped us a huge amount on the opinion page, for example, that we launched this year. And they will recommend a speaker replacement when someone drops out. They're a brilliant help for sort of anything like that. It goes without saying that the sustainable finance space moves extremely quickly, so we've always got to be willing to adjust last minute. Political speakers always drop out. New initiatives or regulation is announced, or Donald Trump wins the election the day of our leadership summit, which always throws a spanner in the works. But it's a delicate balance of sort of big picture topics and sectoral deep dives, especially when our audience is such a large cross section of the industry. And with over 320 member firms, we have to put quite a lot of effort into making sure that there is something for everyone and that everyone feels included and that they can get something out of it. We need the right mix of sort of overview topics and sort of in-depth topics, particularly for people who have been attending our conferences for years and have always heard about biodiversity. They want something slightly more in-depth than potentially someone who's new to the topic. But luckily, the speakers that we are able to recruit are industry leaders, and we're lucky that so many of them are already engaged with UKSIF work. Definitely makes life easier. I hope that it helps explain the process a little bit. But maybe we could finish up by looking ahead to next year. We've just launched the registration for Ownership Day, which will be in March. Anna, could you let me and the listener know how many people are registered for that?
Yeah, of course. We've had exceptional take up already. We've had nearly 60 registrations, which we're really happy about. And actually, at our most recent event, our member social, which we had this Tuesday, a lot of people were already getting the dates in their 2025 diary. We're really looking forward to starting our event cycle again in a few months, and this time with Isabel on board for the whole year.
Brilliant. I'm really looking forward to it too. That's a very cheerful note to end on. I hope to see a lot of our listeners at the events that are coming up in January and beyond. And thank you for joining us on the 5th day of UKSIF-mas. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for day 6. Remember to like and subscribe to be the first to hear our episodes. Thanks both.